The janitor's hands trembled as he clutched the mop, hidden behind the door to the CEO's private office. The dim light of the late hour cast long shadows, but his heart raced louder than the faint hum of the air conditioner. You understand. If this leaks, we're ruined. The CEO's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Another voice, one colder and sharper, replied, if anyone finds out, it won't just be your company that's finished. Lives are at stake. The janitor's breath hitched. What are they talking about? What lives? He knew he should leave, but his feet refused to move. Then the CEO dropped a name, his name. The mop slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. The conversation stopped. The door creaked open. Who's there? And just like that, his quiet, predictable life spiraled into a dangerous game of secrets and survival. The janitor, Hassan, had always felt invisible, a ghost drifting through the grand halls of Empire Global Corporation. The pristine marble floors, high ceilings adorned with crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with modern art were a testament to success, power, and wealth. Yet, for all its glamour, the building felt cold, like a gilded cage for its occupants. Hassan's life was simple, a job he'd done for years without complaint. He arrived before dawn, cleaned the towering offices, and left long after the city's skyline lit up against the night. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills for his modest home and supported his teenage daughter, Aisha, who dreamed of going to college someday. He often watched the employees pass him by, their tailored suits and expensive shoes clicking against the polished floor. Most didn't even notice him, but that was fine. Hassan liked being unnoticed. It allowed him to observe, to learn the little truths hidden in whispers and glances. Tonight, however, something felt off. The usual hum of productivity had been replaced by an eerie stillness. The CEO, Mr. Cameron, was still in his office, pacing back and forth, his silhouette casting restless shadows against the frosted glass. Hassan shook his head and returned to his task. What did it matter to him? These weren't his problems. He was just the janitor. As Hassan cleaned the corridors leading to the executive offices, he noticed something unusual. The door to the CEO's private lounge was slightly ajar. That door was always closed, locked, even. Inside, voices murmured, low but urgent. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Tension, laced with fear. He hesitated. It's none of my business. But as he moved to leave, he caught sight of something through the narrow gap in the door. A leather briefcase on the table, slightly open, revealing stacks of money and a flash of what looked like official documents. Hassan's brow furrowed. Was it normal for a CEO to have cash like that on hand? His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp, hushed voice. If this backfires, Cameron, you know what it means. For all of us. The CEO's response was quiet but firm. I won't let it. Nobody knows and nobody will. Hassan backed away, his pulse quickening. What could be so important, so dangerous, that they needed secrecy at this hour? As he retreated, his foot brushed against a loose tile, and the faint sound echoed down the hall. The voices stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Hassan froze, his breath caught in his throat. Did you hear that? One of the voices asked, sharp and alert. For the first time in his life, Hassan wished he truly was invisible. Hassan barely made it back to his cleaning closet, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. He leaned against the door, gasping for breath, the muffled voices from the CEO's office still echoing in his ears. Curiosity burned through his fear. What had he just stumbled upon? Inside the private lounge, the conversation resumed, but this time, the voices were sharper, more sinister. I don't care how many people we have to silence, the second voice snarled. Hassan recognized it now, Ali Raza, Cameron's longtime business partner and the company's chief financial officer. The offshore accounts are set. As long as the investors don't find out, this will blow over. By the time anyone realizes the books are cooked, we'll be untouchable. Cameron's voice wavered. What about the employees? They'll lose everything. Ali's laugh was cold, devoid of humanity. And their collateral damage. This is about survival, Cameron. Yours and mine. Hassan pieced together the horrifying truth. The company's leaders were embezzling millions, siphoning funds into secret accounts, all while planning to abandon ship and let the company collapse. The stakes weren't just financial. It would devastate the livelihoods of thousands of employees. But then Ali's tone turned darker. And don't forget about the whistleblower. If he talks, Cameron cut him off. He won't. I've handled it. No loose ends. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Hassan's stomach twisted. A whistleblower? Someone already tried to expose them, and failed. As Hassan replayed the conversation in his head, the weight of what he'd heard pressed down on him like a boulder. He wasn't just some janitor anymore. He was a witness, the only one who knew the truth. His first instinct was to tell someone. But who? He had no proof, no recordings, just the words he'd overheard. And who would believe him? A lowly janitor accusing the CEO of Empire Global Corp of fraud and conspiracy? The thought made him laugh bitterly. He grabbed his mop and tried to go about his work. But the image of the briefcase full of cash kept flashing in his mind. What if they were planning to leave tonight? What if they'd already tied up all their loose ends? As he moved through the silent halls, Hassan's eyes caught the flicker of a security camera. He paused. The cameras. If there were cameras in the lounge, they might have recorded everything. With renewed purpose, Hassan made his way to the security room. It was deserted, as expected at this late hour. He quickly scanned the monitors, his hands shaking as he clicked through the feeds. His stomach sank. The camera in the lounge had been deactivated. But just as he was about to leave, something caught his eye. A live feed from the underground parking lot showed Cameron and Ollie standing by a black SUV, speaking with a third man Hassan didn't recognize. The man carried a small briefcase, the same one Hassan had seen earlier. Hassan leaned closer, his eyes widening. He had to act, but every move felt like a gamble. Hassan wrestled with his fear, his mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. What if he went to the police? Would they even listen? Or worse, what if Cameron and Ollie found out? People who talked about no loose ends wouldn't hesitate to make him disappear. He thought of Aisha, her face lighting up when she talked about her dreams of becoming a doctor. If something happened to him, who would take care of her? Hassan's hands balled into fists. He couldn't just walk away. Too many lives were at stake. Not just his own, but the employees who would lose their jobs, their savings, their futures. He decided to start small. He needed to warn someone inside the company. His mind went to Sarah, the head of HR, who had always been kind to him. If anyone could help, it was her. Sneaking through the halls, Hassan made his way to Sarah's office. He tapped lightly on the door, praying she was still there. To his relief, the door opened, and Sarah appeared, looking surprised. Hassan, what are you doing here this late? He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Her expression softened. Come in. As Hassan closed the door behind him, he felt the weight of his decision. This was it, the moment he crossed the line from bystander to whistleblower. But before he could speak, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and froze. An unknown number, but the message was chilling. We know you're watching. Stay out of it if you want to see your daughter again. Hassan's blood ran cold. The walls seemed to close in around him. What had he gotten himself into? Hassan's hands trembled as he clutched his phone, rereading the threat over and over. His mind raced. They knew. Somehow they knew he had seen too much. His first instinct was to run, but where? How could he protect Aisha if these men were powerful enough to destroy anyone who crossed them? Sarah's voice pulled him out of his spiraling thoughts. Hassan, what's going on? You're scaring me. He looked at her, the weight of the moment bearing down on him. Sarah, something terrible is happening. The company, Cameron, Ollie, they're stealing millions, and they're willing to hurt anyone who gets in their way. Sarah's face paled, but she didn't interrupt as he explained everything. The voices he overheard, the briefcase of cash, and now the text message threatening his daughter. Her hand flew to her mouth. My God, Hassan, this is huge. But if they've threatened you, they won't stop. That's why I need your help, Hassan said, his voice shaky but determined. I can't do this alone. Before Sarah could respond, the office phone on her desk rang, breaking the silence. She hesitated, then answered it. Her expression darkened as the voice on the other end spoke. It's Cameron, she mouthed to Hassan. Sarah. Cameron's voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of menace. I need you to come to my office immediately. Bring the janitor with you. Sarah's eyes darted to Hassan. She forced an even tone. Of course, sir. We'll be right there. As she hung up, Hassan shook his head vehemently. This is a trap. We can't go. We have to, Sarah said, her voice low but firm. If we don't, they'll know we're onto them. We need to play along. Just long enough to figure out our next move. Reluctantly, Hassan followed her through the dim corridors. Every step felt heavier than the last, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. When they reached Cameron's office, the door was already ajar. Cameron and Ollie stood inside, their expressions unreadable. Come in, Cameron said, gesturing to the chairs across from his desk. We need to have a conversation. As Hassan and Sarah sat, Cameron's demeanor shifted, a cold smile spreading across his face. Hassan, you've been a loyal employee for many years, quiet, hardworking, But tonight, you decided to stick your nose where it doesn't belong. Hassan's throat went dry. He wanted to deny everything, but Cameron continued. We know you've been snooping, listening to things you shouldn't. And now you've involved Sarah. He glanced at Ali, who smirked. You've put her in danger too. Danger, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. From who? You. Cameron leaned back in his chair, feigning disappointment. I hoped it wouldn't come to this, but you forced my hand. He motioned to Ali, who produced the briefcase. Inside this case is enough to ensure your silence. Take it, both of you, and forget everything you've heard. Or, his smile faded, we'll make sure your silence is permanent. Hassan's mind raced. He couldn't let them get away with this. You think money will fix this? What about the employees? Their families? You're destroying lives for your greed. Ali slammed his hand on the desk, his voice venomous. Careful, janitor. You're out of your league. Cameron held up a hand, silencing him. Hassan, this is your last chance. Take the deal or face the consequences. Hassan met Sarah's eyes, and a silent understanding passed between them. They weren't walking out of this room as victims. They had to act. And fast. I'll take the deal, Hassan said, his voice shaking just enough to seem convincing. He reached for the briefcase, his hands trembling. Cameron and Ali exchanged satisfied glances, letting their guard down for just a moment. That moment was all Hassan needed. In a swift motion, he swung the heavy briefcase at Ali, knocking him off balance. Sarah seized the opportunity, grabbing Cameron's phone from the desk and bolting toward the door. Cameron lunged to stop her, but Hassan stepped in his path, his years of manual labor giving him enough strength to hold his ground. Run! Hassan shouted to Sarah as Cameron wrestled with him. Sarah didn't hesitate. She sprinted down the hall, dialing the police as she went. I need officers at Empire Global Corp immediately. There's fraud and assault happening right now. Back in the office, Cameron managed to shove Hassan against the wall. You idiot! Cameron growled, his face twisted with rage. You've ruined everything. But Hassan refused to back down. You did that yourself, he spat, his voice steady despite the pain coursing through his body. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hall. Sarah had managed to summon the building's overnight security team, who burst into the office, guns drawn. Cameron and Ali froze, their faces draining of color. Hassan, Sarah called from the doorway, her voice filled with relief. It's over. As the guards restrained Cameron and Ali, Hassan slumped against the wall, exhaustion washing over him. For the first time that night, he allowed himself to breathe. They had won, not just for themselves, but for everyone who would have been destroyed by Cameron and Ali's greed. As the police arrived and led the conspirators away in handcuffs, Hassan and Sarah exchanged a look of triumph. They weren't just survivors, they were heroes, and they had proven that even the most underestimated person could make a difference. Hassan thought of Aisha, of her dreams, and smiled through the pain. For her, and for everyone who counted on justice, he'd do it all over again. The next morning, as the sun rose over the towering Empire Global Corp building, Hassan sat quietly on a bench in a small park nearby. His hands rested on his knees, his gaze distant, lost in the whirlwind of events from the previous night. The once pristine halls of the company felt like a distant memory, replaced by the haunting realization of how deeply betrayal had poisoned its core. Cameron and Ali were in police custody, their web of lies exposed, but the victory felt bittersweet. Hassan had spent years cleaning those offices, believing he was part of something greater, a small cog in a massive machine of progress. Now he saw the truth. It had all been a facade, built on the backs of honest people like him, only to serve the greed of a few at the top. He thought of the employees, their laughter in the break rooms, their shared hopes and struggles. How would they feel when they learned the truth? Would they hate him for bringing it to light, or would they see him as the man who saved their futures? The weight of responsibility pressed heavy on his chest. Hassan closed his eyes and thought of Aisha. Her face, bright with hope, was his anchor. He had fought for her dreams, and for the promise of a better world. But the cost had been high. His anonymity, his quiet existence, gone. He was no longer invisible, and the thought both terrified and exhilarated him. As he sat there, Sarah approached, her steps hesitant but purposeful. She sat beside him, offering a warm smile. Hey, she said softly. How are you holding up? Hassan sighed, his voice heavy. I don't know. I did what I thought was right, but it feels hollow. Like no matter what, something's been lost. Sarah nodded, her expression understanding. You're right. Betrayal cuts deep. But you also saved so much, Hassan. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good immediately, but it matters. He turned to her, searching for reassurance in her eyes. Do you really think it'll matter? She smiled. It already does. The following weeks brought dramatic changes to Empire Global Corporation. The board acted swiftly, appointing an interim CEO and initiating an internal investigation. Employees who had unknowingly been part of Cameron and Ali's schemes were cleared, and measures were put in place to rebuild trust. For Hassan, life had taken an unexpected turn. No longer just the janitor, he was hailed as the whistleblower who saved the company from collapse. But he didn't bask in the spotlight. Instead, he focused on returning to normalcy, something he desperately craved. One afternoon, as he cleaned a now-bustling office, a group of employees approached him. They carried a small box wrapped in bright paper. The team leader, a young woman named Priya, stepped forward with a grin. This is for you, Hassan. It's from all of us. Hassan blinked in surprise. For me? Why? Because you're our hero, Priya said, her voice full of admiration. You didn't have to risk everything, but you did. And now we have a chance to make things right. Thank you. Hassan hesitated before taking the box, his hands shaking slightly. Inside, he found a framed photo of the office team, signed by everyone, with the words, "To the man who reminded us what integrity looks like. Thank you for saving our future." His throat tightened, and he looked up, his vision blurred with tears. I don't know what to say. Just say you'll stay with us, Priya said, smiling. We need people like you. Hassan chuckled, shaking his head. I'm just a janitor. Sarah, who had been watching from the side, stepped forward. Not anymore. The board wants to offer you a new role, Employee Integrity Liaison. It's a fancy title, but basically, it means making sure something like this never happens again. Hassan stared at her, stunned. Me? But I don't have the skills for that. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. You have everything you need. Honesty, courage, and a heart that cares about people. That's what matters most. In that moment, something shifted in Hassan. The doubt and fear that had clung to him like a shadow began to lift. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was part of something greater, something he had helped rebuild with his courage and integrity. Later that evening, as he walked home, Aisha greeted him at the door with a hug. Baba, I heard what happened at work. Everyone says you're a hero. Hassan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. I just did what I had to, Beta. For you, and for everyone. She beamed up at him. I'm proud of you, Baba. And for the first time in weeks, Hassan felt whole again. His quiet life had been upended, but in its place, he had found something far greater. Purpose, respect, and the knowledge that even the smallest voices could make the biggest difference. Hassan's story reminds us that courage often comes from the most unexpected places. It's not about having power or status. It's about standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Integrity, loyalty, and the willingness to fight for others can change the course of countless lives. In a world that often values silence over confrontation, Hassan chose to speak up, proving that one voice, no matter how small, can expose injustice and inspire change. His bravery not only saved a company but also reminded us all that doing the right thing is always worth the risk, no matter the cost. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments below. What would you have done in Hassan's shoes? Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little inspiration, and subscribe for more powerful, life-changing stories. Together, let's uncover more tales of courage and integrity.